Okay, well, I'll just kick it off then. So yeah, hi everybody, I'm Paul. Today is our Cassandra Town Hall. We have three somewhat like smaller present talks today, or presentations, or whatever you want to call it. So we first one up, we have Scalable Objects Persistence version 2 with Gerardo Recinto. We also have Aaron Ploetz, one of our Cassandra catalysts, will be just giving us a little behind the scenes or talking about Cassandra Corner and what he's doing there. And then lastly, we'll have Josh McKenzie giving us his quarterly update on the state of Cassandra. So, but yeah, I'll just give a few community announcements before we get started. 1 second here. All right. So Community Spotlight, there's an article that was posted on how to use self-signed certificates to connect to Azure managed instance for Apache Cassandra. And that's by Alexander Lay. So you can scan the QR code there if you would like to check out that article. It's also on the ComDev channel if you're on that in Slack. Yeah, and I'm very excited. I want to give a huge congratulations to Lindsay Zarevchik, who has been accepted by the PMC as the newest Apache Cassandra Catalyst. So welcome, and yeah, we're super happy to have you. So congratulations. And then lastly, just if you are interested in presenting, you have something interesting use case you want to present in one of these town halls, you can reach out to me, just paul@constantia.io. Yeah, we love to hear what you all have to share, and we're happy to help you share that. Yeah, so that's it for me. I will hand things over to Gerardo.
Okay, let me share my screen. Put this on slideshow. Yeah, so I'm going to be presenting Scalable Objects Persistence version 2. FYI, this, let me call it SOP. This is the second iteration of this objects persistence. As you know, we have today object relational mappers like Java, JNA, and then .NET entity frameworks. All of those are mapping objects to tables, to RDBM back and RDBMS. This library, this technology I'm presenting is about pure objects persistence. You persist the object on the back end. Yeah. Going to the high-level design or macro level of things. Today I have on the upper diagram on the slide, I'm showing the current basic topology or scheme, scheme or data flow of applications. You have an app, you connect to microservice, and then there is your SQL database or your NoSQL database. Nothing special there. I keep it very simple. And then on what is being recommended using SOP is having an app, having a microservice, and then you use the SOP code library. It's a code library, by the way. And then once you use that in your application, it has API for managing objects, searching objects, range query, range update. And then, of course, if you comply with its requirements, it requires Redis. And today, Cassandra is a backend database, objects storage. It turns your microservice into a part of the database family, if you may. So basically, SOP, I'm able to, in SOP, I'm able to find a way how to solve this problem. Traditionally, when you write a microservice, you're writing business logic and you are doing a client server call to the backend database. But I'm able to create an orchestration and turn Redis and Cassandra into, and then your microservice into a database family, meaning your data is closest to your application. Like your microservice is a database, if you may, So you don't need to write any SQL code or logic. You just manage your data, your objects. That's it. And I've listed here some characteristics that basically makes it advantageous. Automatic object serialization, so you don't need to write a table, you don't need to write an SQL or SQL. Decentralized, hotspot-free, horizontally scalable database server. Your microservice becomes a decentralized server. Like imagine Oracle server. You always submit to Oracle server your SQL call. There's one point of failure, and once Oracle server domain node goes down, you need to it's not hotspot free and it's not horizontally scalable. But this one turns your database family into horizontally scalable setup. And then it has built-in memory. Oops, sorry. I have to bring back. Yeah, there you go. Built-in memory caching, because I put in Redis right there as part of your requirement, then you naturally have caching. You don't need to write any more Redis code. It's part of the solution. And then support for very large data and data streaming. And of course, since Cassandra is very good in, its strength is about data persistence, what do you call it, partition persistence. I'm able, in SOP, we're able to provide an API that basically can sprinkle a very large data across different partitions. And that's for free. It's already baked into the API. Cursor-based sorted range query and updates. Of course, when you're managing ranges of data, you'd like to do it in high speed or bulk operations. It's available as an API. And then, of course, ACID transaction. Putting the B3 or MY-try in the SOP code library allows us to model to make it as the controller. So then creating ACID transactions, verifying record versioning, versions during commit becomes very easy in the controller setup. So that's the advantages of SOP code library at a high level. I have heard from Apple that they've been writing data layer logic and putting that in Redis. But that's very hard. You don't need to do that with SOP code library because of all the orchestration that I'm able to put in SOP. You can put your code, you write it in Golang, for example. You don't need to move that to the Redis cluster. Anyway, some high-level advantages. Moving on to the next slide. I'm touching the use cases of SOP. One is a video blob. As I mentioned, you can save a very big database or a very big data by using SOP to the backend database Cassandra. And this is a layout of a video blob, for example. You have a very big video. You have, for example, a store called Food Store, and your key is like key and internally key and chunk number for video 1, for video 0, for video n. It's in its own partition Cassandra, which has pointers to chunks of the data of the video. Like for video chunk number 0, you have a special partition for that, another partition for video number 1, chunk number 2, and so on and so forth up to the number of chunks of your video. So all of that are laid out by SOP code library for you, so you don't have to do this layout and address scalability. That is using the API. It has a very simple API that allows you to upload different chunks or as part of the data streaming session. All of this is done for you on the backend without you writing any code. Yeah, that's the idea. One of the use cases of SOP. There you go. Another use case is, for example, you'd like to use in AI. AI is a very popular topic nowadays. I have conceptualized that one of the things that is required for AI is indexing, data, fast searches, dynamically or high speed management of your data, wherein all of your data are indexed. That's traditionally very hard to write, of course, because when you create a table, you have to define your own index. It's a manual action to define an index on the backend database, or you have to write your data so then it can indirectly take advantage of an index. But that's an indirect, or there's a layer of translation. In SOP, all of your data, all of your store gets its own MWay try algorithm. Each of these store is stored in your own index. The B3 is the index itself. So then you can define hundreds or many kinds of stores. All of this, if you can imagine in AI, are thoughts databases, categories of data, ideas. SOP is very compatible to that. It makes it a first-class citizen. So all of your stores are getting MWay search, MWay search tree or MWay search try, without you knowing about it. You just use the API, create a store, add elements to it, search elements from it, and basically SOP will take care of that, of putting that in the B3 on the backend for you, so you can do optimal searches. So then, if you may, it's an accelerator for AI use case. And of course, I put in links on the bottom where I can show more detailed discussion about it. Yeah, this is the second use case of SAP. Let me touch the simple use case. The simple use case, of course, is to store a very simple data, like and I will take care of the opportunity to show a sample code in Golang for that. So this is sample code. You initialize it. You initialize your Cassandra and your Redis. You start the transaction. Begin the transaction. You configure a store like food store with parameters that are basically for setting up the B3, like 200 slot lengths, description. And in this use case, I'm saying this is small data. So then SOP can leverage these hints. So then it can prepare a optimal B3 for storing very small data. So like for example, the data is persisted together with the node of the tree. So that kind of scenario is very good for small use case, small data use case. And then new B3, you add an item and you say commit. That's it. This is a very simple, create a B3, store, add an item to it, and then commit. Of course, there's other API like search, find item, find one. And then there's API for range queries like move next, move to next record, move to previous record, and stuff. Of course, there's some delete API and update too. Yeah. And on the bottom is a link to that in GitHub for the sample code. Yeah, that's a sample code and the basic use case. Let's move on to the next slide. Here, I say this is really just to throw in the pitch about SOP, Scalable Objects Persistence. And of course, it's an open source project. Everyone is welcome. I'm just a maintainer right now. I treat myself as a maintainer. And of course, I need a lot. SOP needs a lot of help. It's a totally greenfield. As I described, this is perhaps the first implementation of pure objects persistence to the backend. And yeah, the decent. I think the design is pretty decent. It will allow a lot of back end and or database or microservices applications for us to offer it part of make it part of the database family. You know, the cluster database cluster. Anyway, here on the bottom is the link to the project link in GitHub. Yeah, but by the way, there's a big need for UI developers. So yeah, for example, I don't have SOP doesn't have a data viewer. So definitely, if you're a big UI expert, you know, engineer, perhaps you know you can volunteer and write the data viewer, for example, for objects. Anyway, so that's the project details, and then the last slide is about the optimistic orchestration algorithm. What makes it special? How come nobody had done similar setup in the past? Well, this is the first time that I think this is the first attempt or solution to turn Redis as a global cache into a traffic orchestration plane for the application. And there's a lot of advantages turning Redis into an orchestration plane. It removes client-server or communication between processes, scalability issue, because that's not scalable. If you just use Redis as a record for indirect trafficking of your data merges and your transaction conflict resolution, it becomes scalable. You know, you can the scalability of the amount of transactions that you can do for doing this new algorithm that is based on Redis is gigantic. That's what make SOP to be able to horizontally scale this new optimistic orchestration algorithm. Yeah. So there's no record locking happening on the back end. It's just use of Redis global cache. And it's able to, for example, one microservice that has SOP code library, it can detect that another transaction happening on another process or another host is doing some changes on the same item, for example, with key foo bar. And then by detecting that conflict, one transaction can roll back itself, you know, and all of that is happening just by communicating through the global cache via Redis. So there's no locking on Cassandra. There's no locking it's doing and or talking to another process. So all of that is, and that the key thing there is turning the B3 into a controller. Since SOP has the controller, you know, in persisting the data, it can do that. Yeah. There you go. I think that's the end of my presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Gerardo. Actually, and Patrick had a question. I actually had the same question I wanted to ask. So what was your inspiration for building this project?
Oh, yes. Well, the SOP has this is the version 2 of SOP. To answer that question, it's well, simplistically, the direct answer is to simplify and offer a solution for simplified data persistence, you know, data management. I noticed when you create a data persistent solution, developers spend a lot of time authoring, you know, doing some entity modeling, so you can create tables in the backend, and then doing SQL coding, and then when you implement a business logic, you have to do some translation from the objects to mapping them to SQL, to the tables using SQL or some proprietary dialect, you know, like SQL. So the inspiration is to simplify that process. So using SOP, you just have to model your protobuf or your structure, or in Java, your classes, or in .NET, and you just call the API to to persist that one function call. So we literally simplified that development workflow. You know,
Yeah.
and then of course, like in the AI application, where in your modeling thoughts, then you have a first class objects objects library to use in the AI use case. For example, you don't have to do some special translation of your thoughts, AI database, AI thoughts into how you persist it to the database. Yeah, the object itself of the thought becomes first class. So that's the idea. Simplification is that. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a practical solution? I mean, are you using this in any projects right now?
No. It's it has yet to be it is a recommendation. It's a suggestion for this to be used. The version 1 in the past, well, I used to work with Microsoft. The history of SOP is really, that's why this is now called version 2. On version 1, I actually recommended with Microsoft an object persistence solution when I was working as a Microsoft engineer. But my recommendation, they confused it and they created entity framework. So if you may, entity framework is an idea born out of SOP, but they implemented the object relational mapper instead of a pure objects persistence engine. So yeah, the answer there is yes. Entity framework and Java, JNA are use cases of this, but they are done in a different manner because I did not get involved in the architecture, for example, in Microsoft when they modeled the entity framework. So anyway, yeah. So that's basically the use case today. It's a different flavor, but then the problem with entity framework and JNA is they undergo a lot of translation. From entity framework, there's a lot of compilation and translation. And then what is being done in the background are SQL, and which get submitted to SQL. And there's a lot of translation. And it's not scalable, actually. And it's not dynamic. You have to during compilation, they create static data definition. But then how about on AI? You cannot use that on AI because AI requires to treat first the objects as a first-class citizen. You have to have a dynamic data store that basically takes in the schema of whatever thoughts it is. So there's a limitation on the current implementation today, like entity framework, which SOP is solving. There you go.
Okay. Well, yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, I can share. I know you added some links on your slides.
Yeah.
I can add those to the YouTube video when we post
Thank you. And I'll send you I'll share a link to the slide itself.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right. Well, next up we have Aaron. He's gonna give us a little talk about his work on the Cassandra corner. So yeah, go ahead and take it away, Aaron.
All right. Thank you, Paul. I hope you all can see my screen. I'm actually not going to spend a whole lot of time here. I think I only have something like 4 or 5 slides. But the idea is that for those of you who don't know, we do have a podcast in the community that I've been doing for a little while now, actually. And yeah, I was asked to come here to the town hall and talk about it a little bit. So yeah, let's get to it. Anyway, in case you couldn't tell, it is called the Apache Cassandra Corner. It's on Spotify for podcasters. It was formerly known as Anchor, if anyone had ever used that for podcasting. I actually do rebroadcast it via RSS to both Apple Podcasts and Google. Lately, Well, yeah, a little bit into season two. They started offering the ability to do video podcasts. So I've been doing that for about a year now. The first season are all audio only, but we've done some video as of late for it. Um, it was actually rated in Spotify's top 30% most followed, which, well, I realize isn't very exclusive company. It's like a whole third of, almost a third of like all the podcasts that are on Spotify. But I thought that was pretty cool. We actually have more content than 71% of all other tech podcasts. And it's streamed in more than 20 countries. Like I said, been doing it a few seasons now. We just did episode 1 of season 3 which was with John Headed. And then yeah, we've done about 27 episodes so far. So hey, real easy. That's kind of what it is. The format is pretty simple. It's just a simple one-on-one interview, aim for about 20 minutes of content. Sometimes we're a little under that. Sometimes we're way over that. I think when I had Mick on, I think that episode was like 11 minutes long. So he was pretty concise. But yeah, 20 minutes is about what I go for, and we talk about a little about your if the guest's background, community involvement, other current projects and role, etc., as it relates to Apache Cassandra. And that's actually, a picture of one of the times that I had Sarma Pittapalli on, who's also a catalyst. At the end of last year, I was sent a year-end summary for for how the podcast had done, how it performed. 82% of our audience were new listeners. And like 11% of them started with the episode where I interviewed Ottavio Santana. For those of you who don't know, Ottavio has been loosely involved with the project every now and then. He wrote an open source tool for it. Wow, this has got to be like 2013. It was quite a while ago, but Ottavio is an author. He's a Java champion, so he does have a little bit of a following. He's originally from Brazil and now lives in Portugal. And it should come as no surprise that it was reported most of our new listeners were from Brazil last year. Otherwise, the top episode streamed last year wasn't even recorded last year. It was at the tail end of 2022 at ApacheCon. I interviewed Chung and Jordan of Netflix, and that was far and away the most popular episode last year. The most shared episode was when I interviewed German and Theo from Microsoft, talking a little bit about what they do with managed Cassandra for Azure at Microsoft and some of the other projects that they do. And the image here is of the episode with Ottavio and I, as we were kind of going through some of his stuff. So hey, my final pitch, if you want to be a guest, it's kind of cool. We talk about Cassandra and Cassandra related projects and other tech. But most importantly, we have fun. I had John on a couple of weeks ago, and I don't think we stopped laughing the entire time. There's an image of Raul and I there. That was right after Raul had dropped an S-bomb that I had to go back and bleep out. So yeah, that was that. And of course, with I had Jonathan and then Aaron Morton. Aaron Morton relayed the story of how he came home from the pub one night after a few drinks and went into the fridge, and he's like, "Hey, I want a pickle." And he looked in the jar. Oh, there's the last pickle. And then ran out and registered the domain name. So, like I said, we keep it light. We have fun. So, and seriously, that is basically all I have. Just quick thank you for your time. And here's my email if you want to reach out. Anyone who wants to be a guest, or if you know someone who'd be a good guest, please reach out. And yeah, I'd love to have you on. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, I mean, it's such a service, I think, to the community. So that's why I wanted to bring you on.
Oh, well, hey, thanks.
Yeah, and also let people know who don't know about it, that it exists. So yeah, well, I have a question. I mean, so what's how do you pick the topics, and how do you find the people to talk, or do they find you?
Well, usually finding guests is a result of me pleading on the one of the mailing lists. But like I said, I've talked with a lot of folks who aren't necessarily active in the community, but maybe working on something that's like Cassandra adjacent. And that's where I've actually, I think, gotten some of the more interesting guests too. I mean, for instance, I had Melissa on here a couple of years ago, I think, because and a lot of people don't realize, and that's why I wanted to have her on, is that the work she does with Constantia really does help us as a community and help get the word out there. So that's an example where it doesn't have to be super duper technical, but just something that helps the community, something that's adjacent to the community that people might find interesting. So yeah.
Sure, awesome. Well, yeah, I'll have to take your tips over blasting the user list for hot lead.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, really appreciate it. Yeah, well, does anybody else have any questions for Aaron? All right. Well, and if you have something to share with him, you should definitely reach out, like he said. But yeah, last up we have Josh McKenzie, who's going to be giving us the state of Cassandra. We're trying to do this on a quarterly basis. So he'll give us his update now. Thanks, Josh.
Yes, I'm here to entertain and to inform. That is always the goal. So we have I just realized this week it's been over 150 days since the last project status email. I was mostly drafted thanks to getting my thoughts together for this discussion here. So there's a double win there. But in the last few months, first off, I want to start, we've got some new committers. So Francisco Hernandez, who's done a lot of work in the sidecar and the analytics space. Mike Adamson, who's done a lot of work with SAI and indexing. We have Maxim Muzaffarov, sorry if I'm butchering your name, who's all over the place, just doing like all the different things. And then Brad Schoening, who has done a lot of work with the CQL/SH-lib Python driver and the PyPy packaging for Cassandra, et cetera. So a lot of new territory, a lot of spaces where the ecosystem is kind of growing out, and we need more committers to operate in those spaces as well. So congrats to those guys. And we all congratulate on the mailing list as well, but it's always worth calling out. It's good to see the community continuing to bring in new folks, but also to expand where we have people with their interest and their focus and their skill set. The primary three things I wanted to chat about today are kind of state of, right? Like what's the state of 5.0? What is the state of CI? And what is the state of Accord? I figure those three are probably things that are on people's mind, or they're interested about, or they're beating their head against it on a daily basis in dev and would like to hear their work validated publicly, which I totally honor and respect. With 5.0, since the summit back in December, we've had 57 commits on that branch, and that's excluding merge commits. That's about 28,000 lines changed in total, 16K in, 12K out on 330 different files. A lot of different work. The highest heat on that is mostly test changes and config changes, and I'll speak to a little bit of that in a bit, which totally makes sense with where we are in our life cycle on getting 5.0 out the door. For reference on Trunk, we've got about double the number of commits and triple the number of files changed, and 74,000 aggregate lines changed, all of which makes sense when you think about the fact that back in November, December, we decided, let's go ahead and target Trunk for transactional cluster metadata to go along with Accord, and that way we don't risk delaying 5.0 as we stabilize a pretty major, significant, required feature for people to run with. So on the 5.0 release itself, if you look inside Jira, we've got just short of 250 Jiras that are new feature or improvement, which is a lot. 4.1 wasn't that long ago. And while we didn't hit our calendar yearly mark, which was our goal for the 5.0 release, we're at a year and a quarter. And when we look through some of the features we have, like we have direct IO on our commit logs, we have stored attached indexing for in-partition indexing, we have, vector search, that little tidbit, new mem table format and index format, which allows for massively more data stored in memory and much, much better tail latencies and throughput. A bunch of guardrails. David Capwell went in there and basically took a very, very significant hammer to repair, because there's a lot of repair messages that weren't actually retrying. So repair should be much more robust now in the face of flaky messages. Bunch of guardrails, CIDR filtering authorizer, a new compaction strategy, data masking, and a new configuration for optimized config, which is part of what the big changes since December are. That's a hell of a lot of stuff. Like, there's a lot going on in 5.0 as a branch and as a release alone, and it makes sense that it would take us a little time to continue to get this thing out the door and to polish things up. The outstanding work, if we look at what we have left before getting this out the door, there's actually 5 JIRAs right now that are flagged for 5.0 RC. 2 of them are pretty low risk. One of them we can't really reproduce. It's BTI format, strong ref leak, and the last discussion on that ticket was, hey, let's go ahead and just move this out if we can't repro it. And the other is some logging inside SAI. Everything else is in review and pretty well understood. There's a lot of work that's been going on in the CI space. A lot of it is the pretty well standard. BTI has been removed from RC now, say the Brandon. So that's a moot too. With CI, there's the standard. We're coming up on a release. We've got tests that are flaky. We need to hammer those things out. But we also have been kind of butting up against the size of our CI footprint just growing to the point to where it is not behaving itself. Part of it is that we have a heterogeneous execution environment in the ASF side from donated hardware. Part of it is the way that these different test suites are actually written and coordinated and configured has some wiggle room during execution. And part of it is that, when we've been writing tests in the past, we've done non-deterministic things, and waiting on sleep is fine until it's not. So there's been a really, really long tail of just continuing to kind of drag this behemoth forward. There's a lot of work going on the infrastructural side and the backend on CI. Mick has been doing a bunch of work to get to where we have a repeatable configuration where you can say, hey, here's the Jenkins file, run it in whatever containerized Jenkins environment you want. And we're looking into how do we actually use unified execution in containerized environments in, say, AWS, for instance, to run our tests instead of the heterogeneous hardware. I've been looking into and chewing on this question of, do we go with just the repeatable Jenkins file, or do we say, hey, here's the declarative pieces that we have for CI? And by that, I mean, like, here's how we build Cassandra. Here's how we get our test list for things. Here's how we run things. Here's how we report things. And so you have all those parts, and the Jenkins file uses those parts, but other CI systems can use those parts as well. And that way, when changes are made upstream, bug fixes are made upstream, et cetera, all of us just kind of inherit it, and it trickles down. And there's a lot going on with that. I'm in the middle of reviewing the patch for the cleaned up ASF Jenkins file. It includes some code that I've worked on for generating a CI summary that we can actually attach to tickets. The CI summary file should be seeing inline test failures with it. And so a lot of kind of quality of life in Jira, what's going on with CI. And the pain of that is that push and pull of, you don't see the benefit of the deeper infrastructural work until it kind of surfaces in a big bang, as opposed to the incremental iterative improvements that you get by continuing to invest in what you've been working on. A couple of things there. We have low single-digit failures on these tests in the 5.0 space before we had kind of a recent regression. The recent regression was, I believe, due to adding a new optimized configuration that, CI has never really had this understanding of more than one config, other than us being incredibly explicit about it and saying, hey, here's the profile I'm running with, here's the flag that I'm going to tweak, here's the thing I'm going to change, as opposed to this new approach where we say, hey, maybe having a 15-year-old config file that we've been pulling along and incrementally tweaking isn't the only way forward. Maybe we could offer another config where we say, hey, users, if you're rolling out a new cluster and you want to have all the new hotness and the bells and the whistles, maybe use this config file and see if it works for you. So that's, I'm very optimistic about 5.0 and very, very appreciative of all the work that everybody has done so far, both in just grinding down those test failures, but also in the CI infrastructural space itself as well. I can say after the last 6 months of my life, not only do I have a very strong opinion about Bash that is not flattering, but also this is a big data problem. This is running effectively thousands of containers concurrently to execute a bunch of different Cassandra clusters, doing a bunch of different stuff, and hoping that literally tens of thousands of tests all pass deterministically, correctly, every time. It is not simple, as we are, constantly rediscovering and are well aware. So that's the state of 5.0. the TLDR is very close, and a lot of people working hard on it. For the state of CI, I've kind of alluded to a lot of that when talking about what's going on in 5.0 CI. A couple other things that we should hopefully see relatively soon is an integration of what are our longest running tests. And one of the things that I did and that we're upstreaming and open sourcing with this Jenkins file change that Mick is working on that should unblock 5.0 is effectively having a view of everything that's happened with all of our tests in memory to do with as we will. And that includes the duration of the test, that includes what's failing, what's passing, what's erroring out, et cetera, which makes it trivial to say, hey, what are our top 10 slowest tests? This is something that we found is I can't, low-hanging fruit is not a strong enough term. Embarrassingly low-hanging fruit. I remember back in, I think it was either 2014 or 2015, Carl Yeksigi and looking at the test and being like, oh, out of this 4-hour runtime, one test is taking up 45 minutes of it, and it shouldn't do that. Let me tweak this thing, and ta-da, all of a sudden we've knocked out double-digit % of our total runtime. The reality is there's a ton of that in our CI right now. About a year ago, I took a look, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something really, really surprising. It's not like 80-20. It's 20% of our runtime for CI suites were taken up by 0.3% of our tests or something like that. So there's a lot of opportunity to help kind of shave off some of the runtime, which in turn lowers our aggregate complexity of what we're trying to deal with, because that's the number of machines that you're running, that's how much execution is taking, that's more opportunities for the stars to align and solar flares to happen and containers to die and all the other things that happen that end up with a flaky run. So we're going back and forth on the dev list. We should continue to discuss which tests we run as smoke tests before merge, which tests we run after, especially in light of the addition of a new config file that we want to make sure that we validate. Part of our struggle has been with the addition of the trie-based data structures, the addition of CDC, the addition of materialized views, any of these features where we extend kind of the fundamentals of how it's working with a new option means we have to ask ourselves the question of, okay, do we just matrix out and do an entire other run of CI for this as well? And when you're already talking about literally days and days and days of execution time, I think the last time I checked it, it was something like, it's well over a month worth of execution serially to go through all this stuff. That is not a small ask. So we do need to continue to figure out what is the right way to tackle this kind of CI ecosystem, because it continues. This is one of the things I'm particularly interested in. I was mentioning before this call to folks as we were getting prepped. Last month was my 10-year anniversary on the project, which is both horrifying and also exciting because I'm not bored of it yet. And I get bored of a lot of things really, really quickly. So kudos to Cassandra for that. This has always been our issue, right? We've always had the scale of CI and getting releases out the door and how painful this is nipping at our heels for as long as I've been around. And it's something that the longer it goes without us looking at it, the worse it gets. And we're looking at it. And so that I'm excited about. And it's good, even though it's working on CI, and working on CI it can be pretty painful. It can be a challenge. I can confirm. So the last thing I wanted to cover is the state of Accord. It's been interesting to me to see since we moved to this whole, hey, for big CEPs, let's have the feature branch inside the upstream project, and let's also have all the tickets inside Jira, and let's go that route. And still, it's like, what's happening with that? Like, it's hard to know. You get this fire hose of Jira updates, fire hose of commits, and it's like, okay, how do I distinguish? Is it A? Is it B? It's kind of hard to keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on with some of these bigger features. And Accord is a very, very big feature. So I was taking a look at the branch. It's currently 118 commits ahead of trunk. And as we all know, a commit can go anywhere from 1 line to 80,000 lines. But it tells us something. There's currently 156 Jiras in total, 86 of which are unresolved in the Apache Jira around Accord. 8 of those are ready to merge. There's a pretty big one that Ariel worked on, which is live migration from Paxos over to Accord, which is obviously pretty important. And if you look at the backlog right now, we've got about 59 issues that do not have an assignee. And if you filter it down to what's low-hanging fruit or normal complexity, right? Because anything in the space of distributed algorithms that it has the idea of challenging, Byzantine, or impossible attached to it, I know I'm not going to dive in head first. But there are 15 tickets that are currently normal or LHF. And so really all of which is to say, Accord is going. It's going strong. It is, as a feature, people are continuing to work on it more or less around the clock. If you look around the world with people we have in a bunch of different time zones and doing novel consensus algorithms that continues to respect and prioritize the core promises that make Cassandra unique and attractive to people in terms of availability, in terms of performance, in terms of eventual consistency. That's hard work. That's really, really hard work, but it's going to be super, super exciting to see that stuff roll out. So all of which is to say, I wouldn't necessarily put a pin on the calendar and say, here's the date on which 5.1 will cut with Accord and TCM. But I can say, when I took a step back and looked at it, I know from knowing the folks that are working on this for years, how busy they are with it and how much is going on with it. But if you take a step back and look at, what are our public signals in terms of the product, in terms of what's going on there, it's a ton of stuff. And I guess one other thing to talk about, which I didn't go through with my notes, but it's worth calling out, was we've had a lot of different CEPs that have come up where we've kind of talked about them and resurrected them. We've, I'm thinking about the management sidecar when I say resurrected, where it's been around for a long time. We've tried to figure out what is its role, what's going to live there. And there's been a lot of really good discussion with that. And the holiday season, it's really, really easy to kind of let things drop. One of the things I'm hoping to do with the update to the status here for everybody is to kind of pick some of those things back up, poke on them, get people re-engaged in the event that they forgot that there was that mailing list thread. And it's been pretty, I guess, heartening to see that the CEP process, the new feature process, continues to go strong beyond just the really, really big up front and center kind of signpost features like TCM and Accord. There's a lot of other stuff in flight as well, and we should be proud of that, engage with that, be excited about it, all the things. So I am, I'll be the first to admit I'm not the hype man Patrick is, because I'm too close to the code. And even though all of us software engineers have to be constitutionally optimistic, or else we all lose our minds with the work that we do, I am close enough to the metal to see the challenges that are in front of us. But I'm optimistic. Like, things are going well, and it's pretty exciting to see how things are evolving and where they're going to go next. So that is kind of my brain dump snapshot of over the last quarter. How are things looking with Cassandra and where are they headed?
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. That was a lot of information, and I think very
Patrick
helpful.
left a comment about the beard. I have to point out, I trimmed my beard last year, and my daughter was like, I don't like this. You don't look like my father. You need to grow that back. I was like, well, okay. So she wants me to have a giant wizard beard. So if that happens, I'm not like aspiring to be a Unix dev. It's family maintenance, for the record, Patrick.
Hey, I had a question about, people who want to get involved, and maybe they're intimidated. Like, what's the easiest way of entry for getting involved in the Cassandra project?
I'm glad you asked this. And for those that are wondering, no, we didn't like stage this and try it beforehand. Recently, so bringing in Brad as a committer was exciting and interesting to see, because Brad's mostly working on the Python space, and we don't really have committers in the core project where we're like, hey, we have this built-in library that's kind of important, that we got a bunch of Java engineers that are like, I kind of learned Python to work on this, and I try not to break things when I touch it. Like, maybe we should get an expert here. It depends on what your skill set is, right? Like, if you're really, really good at Python, you have a variety of options. You have the Python driver that has come into the foundation and entry. You have the built-in CQLSH structure that's there. If you are an expert with Java, but you're not like super into data structures and algorithms, we now have the Java driver itself that has come in tree and in project. And we have, of course, the core database itself. So this is going to be another brain dump, Paul, but in the email, I'm going to try to break it down. This is why I'm glad you asked, because it's in writing, it'll be easier to see, hey, if you're good at X, here's your options. If you're good at Y, here's your options. We have a Kanban board filter that is essentially LHF, low-hanging fruit. What are things to do that probably won't melt your brain and probably won't surprise you with a lot of really, really hard, edge conditions? And there's a variety of tickets there that you can literally just kind of pick and choose what suits your fancy and what is your interest as a Java dev. So we have a lot of stuff to pick from. And as best I know, really the only way as a newcomer, if you come into the project, to know what that is, would have been those status update emails, or just kind of trawling through Jira yourself to see what you think.
Sure.
Which isn't the most friendly. I mean, we might have some getting started stuff on I know we do for like getting your environment set up, getting engaged on the web page itself as well. What we should probably do, and I'll coordinate with Melissa and you guys as well, is kind of have a look. Our catch-all is go to the Cassandra Dev Slack and ping the @Cassandra Mentors alias, and we'll take you from there. So that's kind of the bottom line of it is reach out to humans and say, hey, I want to get involved. What should I do?
Yeah.
But there is, my goal is that we have a lot of stuff people can self-select from as well if they're intimidated by or not interested in engaging on the Slack site as well. And of course, we have documentation stuff that we all work on, and connecting with Lorena and finding out what we're working on there, what we need to do there is super valuable. But it might be worthwhile to say, look, for any given domain, if you have expertise in domain X and want to get involved, contact person Y. It's like maybe just have like a Python domain mentor and a Java domain mentor, etc. That to me would make sense as a thing that we could pursue. But
Sure.
Anyway, yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, I've been talking with some people about getting some best way to get started content on some of these town halls as well. So I think that'll be great way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've been very impressed by and influenced by, I'm not a front-end developer by any stretch, but if you go into the front-end dev space, you go into the framework space, you go into the React, GraphQL, etc., a lot of them have this like get started in 5 minutes. A lot of them have this like, look, if you want to get involved, here is your incredibly paved path, the smooth path to utopia to get involved with the project. And I mean, numerically, there's a lot more folks that are getting involved with that, but also, like there's differences in terms of how much pre-reading you have to do to really be engaged in both ecosystems. I don't think it would hurt us, is the TLDR, to be a bit more aggressive and intentional about how we're trying to position ourselves to get people involved. Because I do think the opinions and the insight from a new generation of developers and from folks who have experience in other domains is really how we do get a lot of interesting insight and kind of that like cross-domain. What is mundane in one domain may be completely novel in another, and we wouldn't even know it until somebody came in and they're like, why aren't you doing this thing? And we all think, oh crap. Okay. So
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like, especially people who've been working on it for a long time, having a fresh set of eyes with the new perspectives. Yeah, it's always great. So
absolutely.
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks a lot. We'll try and make this a regular thing. I think quarterly would be great, just to keep all the this upcoming stuff fresh in everybody's mind. And like you said, bringing up things that maybe have fallen off. I think it'll be great just to have that front and center.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right, cool. Well, yeah. Thank you everybody for joining us today. And of course, we'll post this on Apache Cassandra YouTube channel so you can watch it later. But yeah, thanks for joining it. Really appreciate it. All right, have a good one. Bye.